The rapture will be a time of mass death. The reason millions, tens of millions, scores of millions, over 100 million Christians will leave the world at the same time is because their bodies are being killed at the time of the sudden destruction. That's in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 3. The rapture is in chapter 4, 16 and 17. And chapter 5, verse 3 is just 3 verses later. So what we can do is link the sudden destruction with the rapture. Now, if the sudden destruction is the context of the rapture, that means people are being killed, millions of people. And that would confirm my claim that the rapture will be a time of mass death. This claim is confirmed in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3. It says, the rapture will come at the time of the revealing of the son of destruction. He's also called the man of sin, but I want to focus on the other label, the other title, son of destruction. Now, son of is an Aramaic idiom that means having the nature of. So the son of destruction would be a man who has the nature of destruction. Now, doesn't that sound like someone who is capable of launching mass destruction? We live at a time of mass destruction, and this is the time of the fulfillment of the sudden destruction back in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 3. So let's use this phrase, mass destruction, and also WMD, weapons of mass destruction, because that's what is most likely to be operative here. What would be most likely to be what reveals this destroyer? Let me say that son of destruction, means the destroyer, but it can't mean just an ordinary destroyer. It should mean the ultimate destroyer, the worst destroyer of all time. To be blunt, a man who would launch, a government leader who would launch nuclear war, that would make him a super ultimate destroyer. Now, this man of sin, that term comes from Daniel 11, and where it's talking about the king of the north. In other words, the man of sin, the original title is the king of the north, and therefore he is automatically a government leader. And government leaders have access to what? Military arsenals. So we're talking about a military attack. He would be the destroyer in terms of using the military arsenal that his government has. Now, why do I say the son of destruction? Why do I say the man of sin goes back to the king of the north? Well, there's 5 things the king of the north does, and these are the same things that the man of sin will do. The king of the north will exalt himself above all that is called God. He will magnify himself in addition to exalting himself. Now, this would be equivalent to claiming to be God, and that's what the man of sin does. He claims to be God. That's in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4. Now, the third thing is he speaks against God. Both the man of sin does this, and the king of the north does this. So those are three things. The fourth thing is that he sits in the temple of God. That's the man of sin. Now, the king of the north, he comes to the beautiful holy mountain. That's Daniel 11, verse 45. Now, the beautiful holy mountain is Mount Zion, and that's where the temple is. So those are four things. Now, the fifth thing is both men are defeated by God directly, and so this points to the idea that these two men are actually one and the same. Now, I introduce this idea of the king of the north. Why? Because he is a government leader. And I want to emphasize the man of sin has to be a government leader in order to destroy in a mass destruction sort of way. Only government leaders have access to what? Nuclear arsenals. Okay, I'm finished with 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3 and 4. And I should introduce the verse 9 through 11. It says the man of sin will tell a lie, lying wonder, in other words, a wonderful lie, and that will cause his opponents to perish. And it says they perished because they did not have a love of the truth, and they had a pleasure in unrighteousness. And long story short, that's talking about the Western world. The Western world is pretty decadent, and we have there's a certain percentage of the people that have a love of unrighteousness, and we have believed the lie that Russia has told, that Gorbachev has told. He is the Antichrist, and he told the lie that Russia had changed. We believe the lie. And what did we do? We disarmed. This country has disarmed because Russia is no longer a threat. That's the lie, that Russia has become a normal country. And so we believe the lie, and now we're getting ready to perish when we get hit by Russian arsenal. Now I want to emphasize this idea of the man of sin being the destroyer. What would fulfill the destroyer better than someone launching all-out nuclear war? And that's what a superpower can do. Long story short, I'm trying to build a case that the destroyer is the leader of a superpower, and he is a destroyer in terms of launching nuclear war. Okay, enough for that. Now I want to introduce a third Bible passage. Revelation 13:7 speaks about this same man, but here he is called the beast. But he's still the same man as the king of the north and the man of sin and the destroyer. He is the Antichrist. All these terms are synonymous with the Antichrist. The king of the beast, it says here, he makes war against the saints, which would mean the Christians, which would simply point to making war against the countries predominantly Christian. In particular, it would be the leading Christian countries. In other words, America and Western Europe. Not that Western Europe is leading, the countries of Western Europe are leading Christian countries today, but traditionally, or up until just recently, they were the leading Christian countries. And so there we have it. These are the countries that are targeted by the beast. America and the countries of Western Europe. Okay, now the same verse, Revelation 13:7, goes on to add that not only will the beast make war against the saints, he will overcome them, and he will gain power through this war over all the nations of the earth. In other words, the whole world. Now, isn't this suggestive of world war? Because he gains the world, and world war is suggestive of nuclear. So here we have the idea, fairly reasonable, that nuclear war is what is meant here. Now, I want to emphasize that this war really should be talking about a war launched by a superpower. Why? Because who can take over the world except a nuclear superpower? If some lesser nation tried to do that, let's say England or France, tried to take over the world. They are nuclear powers, but they're very small nuclear powers. If they try to take over the world, one of the superpower nations, America or Russia, could wipe them out. So we have to discount any nation fulfilling this role except a superpower nation. If a superpower nation is going to launch a war that gains that power, gains that nation, the whole world, shouldn't we think in terms of nuclear war? Because we are talking about superpower nations. And there are two of them, America and Russia. Now, America is not about to fulfill this role. We can just discount America. So that leaves which nation as the obvious choice? Only Russia. I want to emphasize that a nuclear attack on America by Russia would be a time of mass death. And so this would confirm my statement, the statement in the title that the rapture will come at a time of mass death. P.S. Paul the Apostle says that we will not all sleep. Quote, we will not all sleep, but we will all be changed in an instant. In the twinkling of an eye, we'll go from physical bodies to spiritual bodies. Now, how would this be fulfilled in terms of nuclear war? Well, Christians living in big cities would be vaporized by the heat of the fireballs. And so they would not leave bodies that figuratively lay prostrate, that in the position of sleepers, people that sleep. And so this will fulfill the statement, we will not all sleep. And we would be changed, it says, in the twinkling of an eye. That's talking about the change from physical bodies to spiritual bodies. Because when the physical bodies are vaporized, the souls that are living in those physical bodies would find themselves with spiritual bodies. And they would be in heaven. And they would be raptured at that time. Now that's 1 Corinthians 15, verse 51 and 52. But Christ says in Luke 17, 34 through 37, that there will be plenty of corpses left, and this will be on the day of the Son of Man, which is simply a synonymous term for the day of the rapture. Because who comes on the day of the rapture? The Son of Man. That's presented in Matthew 24, verse 29 through 31. It says the stars will fall. That's talking about man-made stars, nuclear fireballs. And the Son of Man appears, and that would be talking about appearing to the people leaving the world, the souls departing as their bodies are killed on the day of the destruction. Now, it says the Son of Man will appear. And then it says the angels he will send his angels to gather his elect. Now that's talking about gathering the Christians and the Jews. And so this is clearly a picture of the rapture. And it's the day of the Son of Man and the rapture at the same time. So these two terms are synonymous. The day of the Son of Man and the day of the rapture are synonymous terms. Try to get that into your head. Now we go back to Luke 17. It says there'll be plenty of corpses on the day that he says there'll be two people in the field. One will be taken, one will be left. Now, the one that is taken, that's talking about the soul being taken. And his corpse will be left. And then the other person that is left, that's talking about the person that does not die. His soul is not taken. And the idea is Christ is communicating to us a survival rate of 50%. Now, applying that to America, we have a population of, let's say, 300 million. So if 50% are taken, that means 150 million people will die. Now, let's say 2/3 of them are Christian. That means 100 million Christians will die. And that would be the scope or size or scale of the rapture, but we have to throw in the 3 countries in Europe that get attacked by Russia. Russia makes an example out of the 3 countries to make the other countries of Western Europe surrender so that they will not be attacked. And so, let's say 20 million people in these 3 countries, Italy, Germany, and Britain. That would be 60 million, so that would be on top of the 150 million Christians, people that die in America. Well, let's say 100 million Christians die. And so there would be 160 million overall, and then they have to throw in Christians in the military bases that America has around the world. But anyway, getting back to what I was saying. Luke 17 is different from 1 Corinthians 15. In 1 Corinthians 15, there are no bodies left, but in Luke 17, there are bodies. Now, how can we explain this seeming contradiction? Well, it's very easy. Christ is talking about the area away from ground zero. Away from ground zero, the heat of the fireballs would not be enough to vaporize the bodies. And so there'll be plenty of corpses left. And Christ says, where the corpses are, there will be the vultures gathered. Where the bodies are, there will the vultures be gathered. My point here is that both of these passages would be fulfilled by nuclear war, Russian attack upon America. P.S. number 2. Why can't the judgment of God be something other than nuclear war? What about biological warfare? What about a chemical attack? It has to be nuclear because 2 Peter chapter 3 says that Peter talks about the flood of Noah's time, and then he says there'll be no more floods. The next time the judgment will come in the form of fire. And then he goes on to talk about that fire. And the idea is nuclear war is that fire. Nuclear fireballs, by definition, are what? F-I-R-E. Now you may say that 2 Peter chapter 3 is talking about the destruction of heaven and earth. That's in verse 11. And it says the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the earth and all the works therein will be burned up. But you've got to understand that the heavens can simply mean the first heaven. There are three heavens. The third heaven is God's heaven, and the first heaven, well, starting at the bottom, the first heaven is the atmosphere around the earth. The second heaven is outer space beyond our atmosphere. In other words, the whole universe. And the third heaven is the highest heaven, and that's simply outside the universe. And so we don't have to take this passage to mean the second heaven. It can simply mean the first heaven. Now, what heaven would be destroyed? What atmosphere would be destroyed in nuclear war? Dr. Edward Teller, father of the H-bomb, says the ozone layer in the northern hemisphere would be depleted by 50% in the event of all-out nuclear war. So that would be a fulfillment of the destruction of the first heaven being destroyed by nuclear war in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 11. Now, the burning up of the earth can simply mean the surface of the earth. Just like in the flood of Noah's time, was the earth destroyed? No, the surface of the earth was destroyed in the sense that it was covered by water. And it wasn't a global flood. It was simply the flood in terms of the Black Sea flood, which happened in Russia. And that would connect that destruction, that judgment, with the judgment in our time, because Russia will be the cause, will be the agent of the judgment by fire. I forgot to explain that the fire, the destruction of the first heaven in 2 Peter is also in Revelation 20 at the end of the millennium. Now, I'm talking about destruction at the end of the church age. In other words, this year, around this year, or you might say some other time, let's say next year. But the point is, at the end of the church age. Now, 2 Peter and Revelation 20 are talking about the end of the millennium. Now, how can we reconcile these two ideas? Well, the idea is the millennium is simply talking about the church age. The millennium ends with the rising of the dragon with 10 horns and 7 heads out of the abyss. That's simply talking about the return of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. And the beast with 7 heads, the beast with the 10 horns is the same beast that goes back to Daniel 7, verse 7 and 8. And that's talking about the Roman Empire, and then it also goes into the return of the Roman Empire. And that's talking about the reuniting of the countries that once were the Roman Empire in Western Europe. And that takes place when Russia conquers Western Europe. And it's a return of one-man rule. And that's what it's talking about when it talks about the return of the beast, which is the return of the Roman Empire. And long story short, the millennium does not begin at the second coming. The millennium ends with the second coming. And I know that sounds strange to you, but I'm not going to go into it right now. I'm going to try to keep this thing short. I know it's too late to keep it real short like I wanted to, but I'm going to close right now, and you can look up my other videos about the millennium. I don't have the title of the videos on the tip of my tongue right now, but I will put that in the description box under this video. So please look it up. And please look up my videos about why the millennium equals the church age. Let me throw in that I'm expecting the Russian attack this month, the month of June, on the 26th, which is the anniversary of the legalization of gay marriage. Now, if God wants to make us feel that he does not like gay marriage, homosexuality. One way he could do that is to have this great judgment day, this terrible judgment day, happen on the anniversary of that Supreme Court decision. So I'm going out on a limb, and I'm saying that by June 26th, we really should see America go into Venezuela and intervene. And that will bring on Russia launching nuclear war. Okay, that's it. Also, the tribulation will last 5 months. Russia will rule the world 5 months, and then the second coming of Christ will reverse Russia's victory.